They thought it was just another routine stop, another easy target. He placed his CIA badge on the table. The courtroom fell silent. Malik Bishop checked the time. 9:47 p.m. Just 20 minutes stood between him and home. The last 3 days had been a blur of back-to-back meetings in Dallas, hours of negotiations, and a red-eye flight that left his bones aching. He loosened his tie as he guided his black Lexus down the near-empty highway. The hum of the engine, the only sound keeping him company. Then, flashing red and blue lights in the mirror. A sigh left his lips as he slowed, signaled, and pulled onto the shoulder. He knew the drill. Hands visible. No sudden movements. Window rolled down before they reached him. A uniformed officer approached from the driver's side. Flashlight aimed straight into his face. Another stood just behind, hand resting on his holster. Evening, sir. License and registration. He looked for his wallet, moving deliberately. Is there a red officer? The cop tilted his head. Broken taillight. Malik's brows inched together. That wasn't possible. His car had just been serviced before his trip. Are you sure about that? He asked, keeping his tone neutral. The officer's gaze hardened. Step out of the vehicle. Malik exhaled through his nose, already feeling the weight of where this was going. But refusing wasn't an option. Pushed open the door, stepping on the pavement. The night air carried a trace of asphalt and gasoline. His suit, tailored, expensive, felt out of place against the cold steel of the patrol car as they prepped. You seem a little nervous, the second officer remarked, circling him like a predator. Something we should know about? Malik didn't flinch. Just tired. Long flight home. The first cop sniffed the air. Smell that. Smell what? Marijuana. Malik let out a humorless laugh. That's impossible. The officer leaned in, voice dropping to a mock-friendly tone. Mind if we take a look inside your car? This was the moment. If he refused, they'd claim he was hiding something. If he agreed, they'd find a reason to justify whatever they wanted. Either way, the script had already been written. Go ahead, Malik said, jaw tight. Image through his car, tossing aside papers, flipping open his briefcase. The second officer pulled out a small prescription bottle. What's this? Blood pressure medication. Look suspicious. Minutes Dr. His hands were cuffed before he could process the escalation, obstruction of resisting arrest. His heart steady as they shoved him into the back of the squad car. Not because he wasn't angry, because anger wouldn't serve him here. Yet. But they had no idea who they had just arrested. The ride to the station was silent, aside from the crackle of the police radio. Malik sat in the back seat, hands cuffed, eyes steady. He didn't ask questions. He didn't protest. He knew it wouldn't matter. At the precinct, they walk him through processing like he was a common criminal. Mugshot, fingerprints, personal belongings bagged and tagged. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, casting harsh, sharp-peeling paint of the holding cell walls. A man in a hoodie slouched on the bench across from him, eyes half-lidded. Another paced in the corner, muttering to himself. The air was thick with sweat and something stale, like old coffee and worn-out excuses. Malik took a seat, resting his back against the cool concrete. He folded his hands, the indentation of the cuffs still imprinted on his wrists. Hours passed. And no one came for him. Then, heavy footsteps. A door buzzed open. Bishop. The same 2 officers from the stop stood outside the bars, smug. First one held a clipboard, tapping it lazily against his palm. Tough night, huh? Malik said nothing. The second cop smirked. Oh, you could make this easy. Tell us what you were really doing out there tonight. Malik exhaled slowly. Coming home from work. The officer leaned against the bars. You fit the description of someone we've been looking for. You got out of the car all jittery, like you had something to hide. Malik tilted his head. I got out because you told me. With an attitude that I wasn't aware foes counted as an attitude. The smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Listen, the first cop cut in, flipping a page on the clipboard. Destruction carries a hefty F******, maybe even some time. But if you cooperate, if you admit to resisting, we can talk about reducing it. A confession. That's what they wanted. Something they could use to make the paperwork easier. Malik met their eyes, one by one. I'll call for my attorney. Silence. The air shifted. The first officer clicked his tongue, then knocked twice on the bars. Suit yourself. They turned to leave. Malik spoke again. You sure you want to go through with this? The second cop chuckled. Pretty sure. Why? Malik leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because if you take this to court, you better be ready for what comes next. The smirk returned, wider this time. We are not worried about that. They should have been. But they wouldn't realize it until it was too late. 2 weeks later, Malik sat in a stiff wooden chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. The courtroom smelled of old books and polished oak, filled with the quiet rustle of paperwork and the occasional shuffle of jurors adjusting in their seats. Across from him, the two officers sat confidently at the witness stand. Their uniforms crisp, their expressions composed. They had done this before, delivering testimony with the kind of ease that only comes from experience. The prosecutor, a lean man with a sharp suit and a sharper tongue, paced before the jury. "Officer Daniels, can you walk us through what happened that night?" The first cop cleared his thread up straighter. "Yes, sir. We observed the defendant driving erratically, and upon stopping his foot is signs of nervous behavior. His hands were shaking, he avoided eye contact, and he hesitated when asked to step out of the car." Malik didn't blink. The prosecutor nodded. "And did you have reason to believe he was under the influence?" "Absolutely," the officer said, voice firm. "A distinct odor coming from the vehicle, and when we asked him to step out, he became uncooperative. Malik nearly let out a laugh. "Uncooperative. He refused a search, raised his voice, and did when we attempted to detain him. Lie after lie, stacked neat bricks in a wall." The jury watched intently. Some took notes, others stood base, perhaps looking for the aggression they had just heard about. The second officer took the stand next. Fiction. The suspect was visibly agitated. Given his resistance and evasiveness, we had reason to believe he posed a threat. For our safety, we had to restrain him. Malik stayed still, his heartbeat steady. The judge, an older man with salt and pepper hair, turned his attention to the defense table. Mr. Bishop, do you have anything to say before we proceed? Malik smiled for the first time that morning. He reached down the latches of his briefcase and pulled out a sleek black identification card. Then, without a word, he played the game. The prosecutor frowned, taking a step forward. The judge squeaked, then straightened in his seat. "Mr. Bishop," the judge said, voice measured, "can you verify your employment?" Malik leaned forward, his voice measured. "Counterintelligence Division." CIA silence fell over the room like a dropped gavel. The officers, the prosecutor's mouth opened, then shut. The jury, they were suddenly seeing the case in an entirely different light. And just like that, the story the officers had so carefully crafted began to crumble. The prosecutor blinked, his confidence visibly shaken. He glanced at the judge, then back at Malik. "Counterintelligence?" he repeated, as if saying it out loud would somehow change its meaning. Malik nodded. "That's correct." The two officers, once so self-assured, suddenly looked as if they had swallowed glass. The second one, Officer Reynolds, shifted in his seat. The first, Daniels, clenched his jaw. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Bishop, are you stating, under oath, that you are an agent for the Central Intelligence Agency?" "I'm not stating it. I'm confirming it." Reynolds inhaled sharply, glancing at Daniels, who kept his stare locked ahead. But the tension in his shoulders gave him away. The jury noticed. The prosecutor ran a hand over his mouth, his composure slipping. "Your Honor, if I may." "You may not," the judge cut in, shifting his gaze toward the witness stand. His tone was no longer patient. It was sharp. "Officer Daniels, Officer Reynolds, would you like to amend any part of your previous testimony?" Daniels exhaled through his nose, fingers gripping the armrest of his chair. "I don't believe so, Your Honor." "No." Malik finally spoke again, his voice as smooth as glass. He leaned forward. "Then allow me to help you remember. You said I appeared nervous, yet I undergo routine polygraph tests, high-stakes negotiations, and field assessments that would make most men crumble. You expect this court to believe I was shaking over a routine traffic stop." Reynolds swallowed. "You claimed I smelled of marijuana, but I have clearance levels that require me to pass the most stringent drug tests in the country. Why would I throw away a career built on precision for a joint?" Daniels looked straight ahead, his Adam's apple bobbing. Malik wasn't done. He turned to the jury. "These men banked on the fact that I would be another case number, that I wouldn't have the resources to fight back. But they made a mistake." Silence, heavy, unforgiving. The judge turned back to the prosecutor. "Would the state like to proceed?" The prosecutor hesitated. Malik could see the war in his mind, push forward and risk looking like a fool, or backpedal and salvage what little credibility remained. "Your Honor," he finally said, voice strained, The state moves to dismiss the charges. Just like that, it was over. But for officers Daniels and Reynolds, the nightmare was only beginning. Daniels and Reynolds sat frozen as the reality of the moment settled over them. What had started as a routine setup had become something much worse, a career-ending disaster unfolding in real time. The judge adjusted his glasses, looking at them with an expression that had long abandoned neutrality. "Before I grant the state's motion to dismiss, I have a question," he said, his voice carrying the weight of the room. "Officers, would you care to explain why you misrepresented the facts of this case?" Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. Daniels inhaled sharply. Neither spoke, nothing to say. The judge let the silence stretch. "Then allow me," he turned to the court clerk, "send a request to Internal Affairs. This matter requires immediate review." The prosecutor closed his briefcase. He didn't even bother looking at the officers. He knew what was coming. Daniel's face had gone pale. "Your Honor, You will be silent," the judge cut in, his tone now icy. "You had your turn to speak." Reynolds rubbed his hands over his thighs, his nerves finally betraying him. Malik sat back in his chair, watching. He could see it in their faces now. The moment they realized their authority was no longer a shield. The jury had turned. The bailiffs, who once stood at attention, now looked at the officers the way they would any other defendant. And Malik. He wasn't done. He placed both hands on the table and let his voice cut through the tension. "I'd like to formally request an investigation into all traffic stops conducted by these officers over the past 5 years. I have reason to believe this wasn't an isolated incident." Reynolds' head snapped up. "You can't do that." Malik smiled. "Actually, I can." Daniels turned to the prosecutor, searching for help, but the man was already packing up. He had no intention of sinking with them. The judge straightened, request granted. And just like that, their entire house of lies came crashing down. But the worst was yet to come. 2 weeks later, Malik sat in his office, a thick file spread out before him. Reports, complaints, records, evidence of a pattern. Daniels and Reynolds weren't just bad cops. They were predators with a badge. The investigation had uncovered dozens of cases just like his. False stops, fabricated charges, intimidation tactics. Some victims had lost their jobs. Others had lost years to a system that never gave them a fair chance. Now, it was all coming to light. Daniels had resigned before he could be officially fired. Reynolds had tried to fight back, but an internal review found him guilty of multiple infractions, including falsifying police reports. His badge was stripped from him in front of his colleagues. Malik had seen men like them before. They wielded power carelessly, thinking they'd never face consequences. But power without accountability was nothing more than corruption. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. His attorney stepped inside, dropping a folder onto his desk. "Settlement offer from the city," she said, tapping the envelope. "They're hoping you won't sue." Malik didn't touch it. "You going to take it?" she asked. He thought about it. About the people who never got justice. The ones who couldn't afford a lawyer. Who sat in cells just because someone in uniform decided their lives weren't worth the truth. Malik exhaled. No. His attorney raised an eyebrow. "I don't want their money," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I want policy changes. I want training overhauls. I want these loopholes closed so no one else has to go through what I did." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll make some calls." Malik turned back to the case files. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Justice only works when the truth has a voice. Some people weaponize authority, counting on silence, knowing the system will protect them. But the system is only as strong as those who hold it accountable. Malik had the resources to fight back. Many don't. That's why we have to question, to demand transparency, to push for real change. Because the truth doesn't bend for power. It exposes it. If this story resonated with you, don't stay silent. Share this video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories that challenge, reveal, and inspire change. Because awareness is the first step to justice.